buy eggs from a farm. Oh, I can buy eggs from a farm locally. I can see elk grazing where spotted frogs live. There's enough salmon left for me to teach school kids at McLean about salmon. But sometimes we have just enough population to make our lakes or well water a bit tainted, maybe because of septic tanks. But we also have a low enough population to be eligible for grants from the USDA rural development programs. They can support water systems if populations are less than like 10,000 or maybe 50,000 in an area 40 miles across. Or these grants can support rural decentralized water systems that can improve our lakes, that can improve our groundwater. And because hopefully in the future, the county can keep some areas as rural, we may be eligible for some of those grants from the USDA Rural Development Program that can improve our well water and our lake water and our waste treatment systems. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Bonnie. As poetic as well as very descriptive. Which other groups are ready to speak?
I'll just add for Clean Black Lake Alliance also that there are things that can be done in the agricultural areas that are beneficial, in terms of economic development, biochar, composting, using biochar to make a superior grade compost. And what was the other thing? And then also making sure that farmers can have, that they can rent land or have land available to them, so that they don't have to buy the land because it's too expensive, but they could actually have land available that's held in trust or something that's made just for that. That's agricultural land that's preserved for people to farm. Okay.
And who's next? I'm gonna do a little riff.
Hello?
Yeah, yes. Charlotte.
Okay, I'm calling you for another reason too. I think that Phyllis is trying to call in if you have to let her in. I sent her the code.
I know I'm in.
Yep, we got
Great.
Phyllis.
Okay, good. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Well, the other thing, okay. The other thing I wanted to let you know is that I think that the definition that you sent is good as far as it goes. I guess it's from the last comp plan, right?
That's right. That's correct.
I think that Black Hills Audubon Society would say that it's not protective enough against the mineral extraction part of our comp plan. That I know that the Board of County Commissioners has to balance all these different interests, but we believe that, now that mineral lands can actually be declared on any agricultural land, that this means that our ag lands are even more imperiled, and our rural character is certainly more imperiled. And so that's one thing I'd like to remind everybody about. And just that the other thing that's in that definition is protection of wildlife to some degree. And there is a proposal to be sure to have the current, not so great, but at least existing wildlife corridor that our county creates as part of a bigger area, regional area, between Mount Rainier and the coast. So when they talk about wildlife corridors, they're not talking about a 20-foot corridor under I-5. That should be connected, of course, to enough rural and wild lands that wildlife can get through the corridor. But anyway, I'd just like to remind everybody about that proposal, which comes from Conservation Northwest. And that's, I think, all I have to say.
I don't know how to raise my hand. This is Krog, and I wanted to say something.
Prague, go ahead.
Okay, so this is not really about rural character so much as it's about the importance of rural lands. and that we need to understand that value of lands is not just value that can be obtained when the land is developed and sold, but that the rural land, the woodlands, the wetlands, the habitat has value in and of itself. And sometimes that value can be translated into a monetary amount when it comes to stormwater processing or stormwater filtration. But sometimes it is just the fact that it is of value for the creatures that are the primary inhabitants of that rural land. And so that's a real important thing to remember, that rural land is not just there so that we people can develop it and make use of it, but it is there because it is part of an ecosystem and a web of life that we are also part of, but we sometimes think that it is only for our use and benefit.
Thank you. Craig. Other comments?
Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm gonna expand on the wildlife corridor. It's actually called From the Olympics to the Cascades. And it's been proposed by Conservation Northwest, and actually there's a Fish and Wildlife group working on the corridor. It's a working group, it's called. And so WDFW is working on it. There are actually 2 proposals. Well, there are options. The main option would be to have a corridor just north of Scatter Creek, and it's not a corridor, it's an underpass. And there's also an idea or the suggestion of improving the underpass at Maytown. So it's much bigger. It's allowing animals to migrate, move from the Olympics all the way to the Cascades. And with this, west of the I-5, in that area between Beaver Creek and Scatter Creek, is to suggest the remain relatively uncongested. I haven't seen their report, but the animals need space to move around and to they need some space, so it shouldn't be dense development in there. So that's my idea there, or not my idea, the Conservation Northwest. They're going to be becoming more public. They've already done designs for the underpass. So I'm just speaking off the top of my head. I was not informed about this meeting and was trying to get the message out to other people. I'm not part of LGGC, but it's a good opportunity. Thank you very much for suggesting things. But I'd have to tag on to Krog's comments about the value of some open space, and actually the maintenance of current creeks, that they shouldn't be modified other than to restore and improve upon them, because especially in the central portion of the county, many well, it's a coho area, and they all the tributaries, Beaver Creek, they have coho, and over the years many organizations, some of the tribe, have been building culverts to improve salmon passage, and then eventually to salmon reproduction. And so we need to maintain those and not develop such that those culverts no longer are functional because there are no fish. I guess I've expanded too long, so I'll stop.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take the floor myself for a second and do a little commenting on the existing statement that is in the comprehensive plan. One is that two kinds of economic activities are mentioned in the description of the rural character. One is home-based occupations and industries, and the other is industrial use. And curiously, in home-based occupations and industries, it's saying that they're allowed everywhere. But the second part of it is, so long as they don't adversely affect the surrounding rural residents. But then the statement before that is talking about industrial use, and it doesn't have any qualifier like that at all. So industrial use apparently could be in the rural area and negatively adversely affect the residential use, unlike the home-based. And in my mind, one of them is inherently more compatible with rural living, that is the home-based occupation, than as opposed to the industrial occupation. So I think that language needs some changing there. Then in the industrial use, it says industrial uses will generally be those that are related to and dependent upon natural resources, the natural resource industries, such as agriculture, timber, and minerals. That's kind of straight out of, except for one Act.
Yeah.
And the word that is not out of the Growth Management Act is will generally be. And I don't understand how rural character could allow for industrial uses that aren't related to the rural industries. And I doubt that the community has ever really discussed that. What kind of industries belong in the rural area that aren't related to our rural resources? I'm not sure. I can think of ones that fit rural character and aren't related to agriculture and timber and mining. So those are part of the comments. And then the other part is about the LAMERDs, those areas that were more densely populated in the rural area before the Growth Management Act. So we're already stuck with them. And they basically generally have septic systems, and they can be very dense, as dense as urban areas are. And it says that these pockets of high density development, some have been, they allow for additional limited high density development. And I think whether they should or should not be further developed at a dense level needs further conversation, because their increasing density with just septic systems seems to me to get into trouble with that various that ecological function that we're hoping that we've mentioned here is one of the values of the rural area, is the ecological benefit. And if you get too many septic systems densely connected by each other, it's hard to get that ecological benefit, which is the point of the rural area in my mind. So some of the things I'm seeing from the comments that have been made so far is that we need to include in our definition of rural area and rural character, and it's not there right now, is the ecological function, the sound, and the quietness generally, except for the possibility of this and that and the other thing. The opportunity for species to live as they normally would, even adjacent to people, but that opportunity to be there.
We have eggnog?
The opportunity for agriculture for people who don't have wealth, but who want to be engaged in agriculture by leasing land from people who are landowners, that opportunity. Those are the things I've heard so far. And we've got Tom and Judy wanting to get in on the conversation. Tom first. You're muted, Tom.
Thank you, Loretta. Thinking about the, you mentioned and others have mentioned the ecological function of rural areas. First thing that comes to my mind is that in the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan, a significant percentage of our ability to bring down our greenhouse gas emissions is planned to come from sequestration, which means largely introducing new trees, additional trees, giving them time to grow, because they take time. It takes time for them to be fully functional as in their sequestration function, and that's going to require a fair amount of land and a fair amount of care, and so forth. So it seems to me that the rural areas are the principal place in which that's going to happen. And so it may be wise to acknowledge that in this definition, that one of the prime ecological functions we're looking to our rural areas to perform for us is the sequestration function through the reintroduction of trees, many new trees. I think so that may be one point to take note of here. Another thing that occurs to me is that I'm familiar with one. There's the first part of the definition that, as I was reading through it, for rural character, talks about the balance between human activities and nature and natural systems, and that really, I think, is intended to refer to this concept that we call sustainability. And one definition that I'm aware of about what sustainability really means is a definition that I learned several years ago from a movement and a concept called the natural step, which was founded in Sweden about 30 years ago. And that has 4 principles. The first principle says we should not be taking out of the Earth's crust more rapidly than we introduce things back into the Earth's crust. The second principle says that we should not be creating new things, putting things into the biosphere that are not natural at a rate greater than those can be reassumed and reintroduced into the biosphere as part of the natural systems. The third says that we should be preserving biodiversity. We should not destroy biodiversity any more quickly than we restore it. And the fourth says that we should do all these things from a human equity standpoint, that we shouldn't disadvantage, in doing these things, we should not disadvantage one part of our population, for example, our rural population, in order to advantage another part of our population, for example, our urban population, or vice versa. So we should do this equitably so that everybody is treated decently as human beings. So those may be things to consider in making our definition of rural character a little bit more specific and perhaps a little bit more meaningful. So those are a couple of thoughts that occur to me.
Thank you, Tom. Judy?
Hi, I was going to mention clean air. So even though, there are real health impacts from air pollution, and even though rural lands tend to be less densely populated, if you're living next to somebody who's, burning wood or other materials for heat, and they're not burning correctly, you can have a lot of air pollution. So, in terms of burning really seasoned firewood, if you're going to use a wood stove and using a certified appliance and using clean burning techniques so that we can preserve air quality in the rural neighborhood. Also, clean water, I think, is important. As others have mentioned, retention of green space and also farmland and habitat for wildlife. And then one thing that I think is important is connected neighbors, that neighbors support each other. Because I think often if you're in a rural community, that's very important.
Thank you, Madeline.
I just wanted to quickly add that I would like to see in rural areas is safe areas for school bus drop off and protected bike and pedestrian trails. That's it. And I hope we'll not run out of time and we'll get to hear from the county too.
Okay, and Lynn?
I am somewhat seconding what Tom said. The mitigation plan, in addition to calling for the planting of trees, the white paper sort of then pointed out that actually we have to preserve the trees, that there is the danger if there's a lot of development in rural areas of releasing as much carbon as is hoped to be obtained by the planting of trees. And then, as Tom mentioned, where are we going to plant all those trees? So the part of the plan that has to do with sequestration, really elevates the significance of having rural land be not highly developed. And the plan also calls throughout it for urban density. So that, because if you have people using transportation, driving far distances, then that's ruining the transportation part of the plan. So I think one way I would define rural is as not densely developed, leaving a lack of density to support these other goals. And at Restoring Earth Connection, one of the things that is very important to us is the relationship to land itself. And there are a number of people in this group that are working on rights of nature issues. And so, as someone has already alluded to today, philosophically, we need to not just look at that land as sort of a void that is ready for development. And I find the idea of factories or commercial development to be very antithetical to a rural quality of life. I mean, to have cows or something next to some polluting factory just seems not a good idea on many different levels. So that's my 2 cents.
And Phyllis?
I'll be brief. I grew up on a farm in Iowa. So for me, rural character is the protection and preservation and promotion of a viable farm operations. And I guess along with that, I'd like to see in our Thurston County, encouragement of farm economy by farm stands, and then promotion of scenic byways, Sunday afternoon drives in the country where you can stop at a farm stand and get local produce, and the urban areas can then enjoy the rural character, but it is preserved and protected for agricultural purposes.
Okay, a nice little bit of poetry to add to the end of that, to wrap all that up. Our point here is to help the county see our various points of view here, but then also to connect it to what that's gonna mean for the housing. And we just had a little of that connection in terms of Lynn's comment. And Madeline, in terms of time, do I have 5 more minutes? Maybe?
You have till 3:40.
Okay, all right, good. Today we heard the allocation of the housing, and several of you raise your hand like this if you watched that presentation at the Board of County Commissioners today. Some of you did, I know, as a few of us were on. We learned that we're choosing to use the part of the buildable lands report that has in it the notion of continuing to grow in the rural areas at 14% of all new units being in the rural areas, as opposed to Sustainable Thurston's goal, which was to have 5% of all new units be in the rural areas. And the difference between those two is 7,000 units in the rural area versus 3,000 units in the rural area in the next 20 years. So I'm thinking of many challenges to the goals we just described for our rural character if we try to move that swiftly to 7,000 more units in the rural area. So that's one big issue. And our county commissioners, Commissioner Menser raised the question exactly that way. He said, well, does that mean we're going to build into our comp planning something that's contrary to what we had in the Sustainable Thurston goal of 5%? And that is where we are at this particular moment in time. The commissioners are asking for another conversation with the county staff about that. So there'll be more conversations there, but this is an interjurisdictional matter. And so it'll go to the TRCP council as a whole, probably at their January 12 meeting. And then hopefully again at their February 1st meeting that they won't make a decision on January 12. Hopefully not. And so we'll have to weigh in on that whole proposal if you think there's some issues related to it, as I do, on that housing. And I want to turn it over to get some response from the county in a minute, but do any of you have more that you might want to say about the description of rural character or about the housing allocation that was just introduced earlier today? Judy.
Just say that I was watching the City of Olympia Council meeting last night, and they had a whole presentation on this housing allocation. If anybody's interested, it was pretty, I would say, interesting proposal to watch, or not proposal, just, section to watch.
And did anybody there raise the issue of how much was going to the rural area?
No, that didn't come up. It was just, that a lot of housing needs to be developed, and also particularly the problem of getting housing for the lower income folks, people at 50%, below 50% of the AMI, area median income, that was a challenge.
If it's a challenge for the City of Olympia, of the 7,000 that's allocated to the rural area, 1,000 of it is expected to be not only below the 50%, it's below the 30%.
Yeah. Also in Olympia,
I just can't even imagine how in an area that's supposed to be low density, that's supposed to be light on the environment, that we could find a way to build housing for the below 30% in the rural area. That's not going to be negative to the environment.
It was also below 30% also. When I said below 50, I meant 50 and below.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. I think half of the allocation, when I was looking at the figures, was about at the AMI of 50 to below 50 or below 30. So that's a lot of housing in that group.
Yeah, and that's because we haven't built it, which is why we have so many people living in cars and tents. Any other comments related to housing? Tom?
Yeah, I'm just, I share your concerns for obvious reasons related to the climate mitigation plan. I mean, the climate mitigation plan assumptions were in large part built upon the sustainable Thurston, direction and assumptions. So I think that's a big concern. Any indication, I mean, you indicated that Commissioner Menser had some questions for staff about this allocation. And as you know, some of us sent letters to others of the commissioners. Any indication as to their response or thoughts about it?
Well, the chair of the commission asked to have the staff come back again. So I think
Okay.
because she felt many issues to be there, and one of the newer commissioners raised some concerns as well.
Okay, so
Yeah.
our message was heard, it sounds like.
Possibly, yeah. Janine?
Can we hear from the county pretty soon, please?
Yeah, well, we're going to, we wanted this to be a chance for the county to hear from us mostly. So we will hear from the county in a minute, but Janine, and then we'll move to the county.
Well, I'd like the county to hear. Remind everyone of is, I think when it comes to housing, that it's really important to remember that housing isn't just about housing, but it's about people and houselessness. People without homes is not really all about building. So much of this housing push that we all try to mitigate or support or fight against, and how it's going to be done, is about Economic Development Council and Chamber of Commerce and development oriented interests that push these, these big movements towards housing. I mean, I want us to remember that, because, we have to put this in this big perspective. And when we talk about it, we have to be talking about wage and income, in our areas, and we have to be talking about mental health, and we have to be really talking about such a package of things when we talk about housing. And we can't just sort of like imagine that this is just about raw numbers of houses that we need. And, because when we do that, we lose sight of the environment. We can't protect those environmental interests in the same way. And we have to kind of push against some of this development interest, or at least we have to at least call it out. So I just want that perspective to be in here when we talk about all these numbers. And the way that we build those houses, obviously we're all here for that. But I just think that maybe we're not always talking about this subject in a full way. I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
Okay, Ashley, can you give us a little, and Annie too, Anna, can you give us a little bit of what you're going to do with our information and how you're hearing it?
So I appreciate being able to listen. We didn't really come with prepared remarks because we were told not to. So we're really just actively listening. As you know, we are kicking off updates to the comprehensive plan, the land use chapter, which is the one that I think was referenced the most, where a lot of the references to rural character exist, is one of the chapters that we have funding to update. So that's good news. I would like to invite the groups participating in this meeting to also engage in a parallel effort that the county is gonna be getting underway, which is the working lands conservation strategy. A lot of the tools that we have in our toolbox now to conserve our prairies and our farms and our forest lands aren't working in the way that we'd like them to. And as we talk about preserving rural character, and a lot of the items that I read here, it's like, it's really sharpening our conservation incentive tools. That's one of the ways that we can do that. There's zoning tools, but then you also have to have these incentive tools. So we are going to be launching that effort. It's specifically focused on conserving our farm and forest lands. And we will be looking at prioritizing what land should be conserved, ones that we'd be able to see multi-benefit outcomes from, and then identifying funding solutions for those. So I just want to throw that out there, that the comp plan might not be the only answer, that engaging in multiple planning efforts, if you have capacity, would be great. And then with the housing allocations, as Loretta pointed out, that this was a very fast presentation that we had to give our board, because we were up against contractual deadlines with TRPC, and there are meetings occurring that we wanted to make sure our board was in step with all the other jurisdictions hearing the information. It is by no means the end of the conversation. So we were fortunate to have Department of Commerce sort of lay the groundwork. We're still all wrapping our heads around what this means, and in conversations we even had with the state ahead of that meeting, particularly what it means for rural areas, and what the expectations are from the state as it pertains to providing affordable housing options in rural areas. I know we're challenging ourselves to think creatively about it, that there are people in our rural communities that need places to live that don't make more than 30% of the median income. And so to the extent that we can come up with creative ways to protect affordable housing we already have, or build some type of rural friendly affordable housing. And so Anna and other folks on our team are doing case studies on other affordable housing options developing. We're looking into protection measures for mobile home parks. We're looking at creative ways to incentivize accessory dwelling units, making them more affordable, changing definitions of families to accommodate co-housing. So I think we hear you, and we understand, at least to the extent that, state law provides definitions for rural character. But I think there still is a level of commitment to provide different housing types. Even with a shifted target, a sustainable Thurston target, we would still have units that need to be developed at all those different income levels. And so if you have any ideas, when you're driving around rural areas and you see something and you're like, that looks like affordable housing that fits rural character, call us, send us a message, give us an address. Like, we can work backwards from that to say, like, how did that get developed? What kind of water and sewer does it have? Is it something that is going to be environmentally friendly? Do we have codes in place to allow that? So I would just invite you to be creative with us.
Okay.
That's it. That's all I got.
Yep, thank you. I'm going to ask you one more thing. Esther and Janine, can you just put your comments in the chat, because I've run up to Madeline's deadline here, which she was very gracious to give. But I do want you, Ashley, to tell us the exact time frame, chapter 2, the lands chapter. When would that exactly be, where we should be engaging in that? I believe it's March. And then the working lands project, when should people be thinking about getting engaged in that?
Probably also going to be March, April, and Anna's looking up right now the land use chapter. Our lead on that, Maya, is going out on maternity leave. So she's trying to get some research done ahead of leaving and then coming back. It looks like May commission for planning commission.
Can you just repeat that again, please, for those two categories and dates?
May of next year.
For
for chapter 2 and chapter 3, land use and natural resources.
Okay. And the Working Lands project would be in March.
We hope to have a consultant on board in the March, April timeframe. Believe it or not, it takes a really long time to get a consultant on board.
And so, and that consultant would be looking for some stakeholder group or something?
It's going to be a blend. We're going to do a technical advisory group. And when I say technical, I'm thinking like American Farmland Trust. They're one of our coalition partners, inviting other land trusts to the table, folks that are actively involved in purchasing lands, working with all these different funding mechanisms. And then there will definitely be stakeholder involvement. We will be leading the stakeholder involvement though, because I think it's important to maintain those relationships. And the leads on that are going to be, there's going to be 3 of us. So our lead on forestry is going to be working with forestry stakeholders. We have a new agriculture manager that will be reaching out to our farmland or farm folks, and then a blend of them and myself reaching out to broader community stakeholders.
Okay, and Janine and I think we need to move on. So
Yeah, I
put
just
your
had
notes in the chat, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say this as an idea for the our friends from the county here, because I see this in other communities, and it's kind of a co-housing type of situation where you build a number of really small maybe they're not tiny houses, but maybe there's something like that, and they're all on one property. They have central focuses for use, you know, so they might have a sort of a general laundry area, general communal area, might have a kitchen in it. And in that way, you can have magnet communities where you draw elders there, for example.
Janine, can you just send that note into the county, please?
Okay.
For our
I have a quick question of Ashley. At the open house, you said there would be no review, that you did not have funds for updating the rural lands. So where is this fitting in when you say you're not doing that with the chapter?
Sue, can we take that offline? Thanks. And Zayed, we haven't seen you in a long time, so at least say hello to us, but I think we need to move on. Can you put your camera on? Madeline, how about just going ahead? Thank you, everybody. It's a very good conversation.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll probably exit if we could just get a copy paste of the chat.
Yeah.
That would be great.